Look, the sad thing about what Norway did is the Sri Lankan government realised they need to regroup and rearm. So they used that peace period to prepare for the all-out onslaught. And I sadly think that the LTTE who didn't have the resources, didn't have the support of international agencies, because that's what the Sri government had, and other governments, I mean, that they were then armed, the Sri Lankans were armed and were sufficiently powerful then to defeat the LTTE militarily, so that a peace process, well-meaning and well-intended, is of no use unless it goes all the way through. And it didn't. And of course, the government of Sri Lanka exploited that.
I think you shouldn't underestimate the determination of the Colombo government that there should not be autonomy. They were committed that this would not work out. There would not be peace. There were several factors involved, ideological ones. The JHU, the Buddhist party, for example, 9 monks within Parliament. This is not a pacific organisation. This is a fundamentalist party, referring back to alleged historical tomes, which give them not just the right, but the responsibility to wage war against the foreign devils, the Tamils, and destroy them and drive them from the country. This was an ideological commitment by the leading Buddhist organisation. Secondly, you shouldn't not forget about the JVP, the People's Revolutionary Party. This is a Marxist-Leninist Maoist party, which in its website and other places quotes Lenin, that there should not be autonomy for minorities before the dictatorship of the proletariat. So that there are fundamental ideological issues, not to mention the plain determination of both the UNP and the SLFP, historically, that there should not be Tamil autonomy. There was never any question that this would succeed as far as the government in Colombo is concerned, as far as I can see. I think that it is the determination of the Colombo regime that there should not be autonomy for Tamils. Whether this comes about or not is another matter. There was determination earlier on that East Timor, for example, would not be free. And lo and behold, because of agitation and various other things, there is a free and independent and democratic country. These kinds of miracles do occur. It's in miracles that I believe.
I know Sam wants to have a word, but just very quickly on that. Look, the dynamics are changing, and one of the things that the Sri Lankan government's done is to get into bed with the Chinese government, which is probably the silliest thing it could have done, because that's mightily upset India, but it'll also upset the United States, Indonesia, and a lot of other countries. Now, it may be that in the future, in order to get at the Chinese, they get at the Sri Lankan government. And one way to get at the Sri Lankan government is to say the Tamils have a right to an independent homeland. So, I mean, don't ever despair that international relations and other things won't turn around and conspire to bring about the things that people want. I'm not saying you should, see this as something that may happen in the short term. It won't. But in the longer term, the dynamics for the very corrupt Sinhalese government are going to change, because they'll find that they've been bought fair and square by the Chinese, and it's going to upset a lot of people. Not just the fact of them being bought, but the fact that China will have such an entrenched position in Sri Lanka.
With regards to an independent state, I think what we've seen over the last several months, and in fact a few years, we see where the Sri Lankan government stands and where the Tamil people stand. The Tamil people in 1976 voted for an independent state before the armed conflict. In 2004, voted for an independent state after the armed conflict. Tamils in Sri Lanka showed their support for an independent state through voting. Tamil diaspora through various rallies, etc. I mean, you saw 150 to 200,000 people flow onto the streets in United Kingdom, in Canada, in Australia. You saw up to 10,000 people flow onto the streets. So through that, you see the support that the Tamil diaspora have for the notion of an independent homeland. On the other hand, the current Sri Lankan government, Mahinda Rajapaksa, ran on a platform that Tamils will not get autonomy, Tamils will not get any sharing of powers, and the concept of an independent homeland is not something that he would support at all. And the Tamils boycotted that election, and he got voted in by the rest of the island. So we see where the Tamils stand, and we see where the current government stands. And I think that in itself should answer the question with regards to independent state. The Tamils want an independent state, and the Sri Lankan government is willing to go to an extent of killing a minimum of 20,000 civilians in order to ensure that that does not take place. I can tell you from a Tamil Australian's point of view, the general Tamil, the community here does feel every time I buy a Sri Lankan product, every time I see a product and it's made in Sri Lanka, I equate that to my dollar that I spend here going towards helping a government that is spending a very large amount of its budget on bombs and bullets that have been used to kill fellow Tamil civilians. However, I think that question would be better answered by other members on this panel, only because I believe they probably have more experience in this area than myself.
Yeah, but just very quickly, I think we're coming to a close, aren't we, Sam? Just very quickly on that, you're putting the cart before the horse. It's not good talking about that sanctions and sporting sanctions and so on till the Tamil community has got an image here of wearing a great injustice. So that is the first part, the first task, I would say, and also because there's this whole issue of people in the camps, and they may be kept there, for all we know, for another 5-6 years. So it's trying to lessen that time frame. But the only way that sanctions, and it was very difficult with South Africa, the only way you can bring about sanctions at the end of the day is that people have a general perception that the government is quite beyond the pale, like Mugabe. And then you may, or North Korea, and then you may get people acting, but that's not the perception at the moment as we sit here with regard to the Sri Lankan government, and that's the challenge, as I see it.
The important thing of what Bruce has said is, unless people are predisposed towards the point of view that you're putting, they will reject it. The process of denial and rejection is terribly healthy and goes on. You can put any case that you like, but if it's contrary to what their prejudices are, they will reject it and ignore it. Now, what's happening tonight is the beginning of a process of people understanding what the real issues are, the 300,000 people, the humanitarian crisis. That has to displace the anti-LTTE publicity of decades before there'll be any change. You saw some of the things tonight that the Sri Lankans have been doing, government has been doing. You need to condition the public to a new reality before they'll start to listen, because they won't go against their prejudices, and the prejudices against the LTTE are very deep.
I only want to speak a word in support of the poor Tamils in the plantations. It was not that long ago that I conducted clinics there, and we examined the heights and weights of children and the mothers for signs of malnutrition. The state of the Tamils in those plantations is even worse, according to our statistics, than it was in Kilinochchi. They are economic slaves. The conditions there are dreadful. The very last thing I would do would be not buy tea plantation tea packets. Otherwise, I wouldn't. I wouldn't play cricket with them. I'd support that 100%.